Jeff Aldham, Aldham Athletic Development. Years I met him with Niagara River Lions in the NBL. He's one of the best in the business. We're grateful to have him on Rock Talk. Thanks for coming on, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate talking shop with you.
So basically, get things started. Let's just tell the viewers a little bit about who Jeff Aldham is, where you're from, how long you've been in the business, and kind of go from there.
I'm just a human being like everyone else and trying to figure it out. And what I mean by that is, just trying to figure out the appropriate life hacks, just ways to help better us as human beings. I was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario, and grew up more of my my schooling years in the Niagara region. Went to Niagara College. I was a walk-on there, got some garbage minutes, and basketball has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. And yeah, brings me to where I am today, just continuing mostly helping, predominantly my business is training basketball players and adults and some other athletes as well. So
yeah, I mean, I can speak to it because I've worked with you. In terms of work ethic and understanding the background of athletic development, I've never worked with anyone better. The time and effort you put into your craft is admirable, and that's why I appreciate you so much, and the athletes I know that have worked with you appreciate you so much. So to have you on the show today and kind of explain to our athletes and your athletes kind of a little bit more about, to dive deeper into what athletic development is to you, is extremely important for me, and it's extremely important for Mike. So what motivated you to kind of get into athletic development?
I was a shitty athlete. I swear on the show. I'll try not to swear.
No, go ahead.
Honestly, just, I was not the best athlete growing up playing sports. And I got a bit of an interesting story in that my grade 8 teacher for me was a great role model. And he helped me push my level of playing basketball and being a better student athlete. And then I went to high school, man, and things got weird. Like high school was a weird place for me. I'm an only child, so I guess in nature, my organic kind of background or foundation is more towards introverted, which is kind of funny because I'm a pretty outgoing coach too, right? Like I know how to turn the switch on, and now in this later part of my career, I can balance out being an introvert versus an extrovert. But in high school, I was pretty much by myself, kind of confused and lost as to not really applying myself. I got by, but I really didn't push. I really didn't strive for excellence, so to speak. And the reality is I really just had no mentoring, right? And mind you, my grandparents, my family have been great role models for me. But again, high school was an interesting time. So I just kind of got by. And when I finished school, I took some years off and worked a lot of jobs. I've done just about everything you can imagine, working jobs and some things that led me to want to better myself and better my life. And I always knew that, fitness and playing sports for me was always a small part of my life, even though I really didn't excel. And then I was like, hey, you know what, man, I really like this. And I think if I go to school for this, I could get a little bit more in depth. I just basically started to become more curious, probably a little later in life than most people. And I got no problem saying that I'm a late learner, and I'm cool with that. That being said, I am continuing to learn, right? So some people I would some people never want to learn. They're maybe narrow-minded or closed-minded. But yeah, I've been a late learner. And so it led me to go back to school. And a friend of mine I grew up with who played at Niagara was like, listen, man, you could come and probably make the team. So definitely going to play basketball there and get an education was my kickstart. And again, that was 17, 18 years ago now. And here we are today. And I'm still trying to better myself and learn more. I've really dedicated my life to this. And I attain a lot of information on a regular from literature, continuing education courses, learning a great deal, obviously, practically from coaching my athletes and continuing my own training. But like, that's what it's all about for me, right? Like, you're all gonna eventually, we're gonna figure out what it is that we like and what it is that attracts us in life, and we're just gonna, I would hope, we're just gonna push on that gas pedal, man, and just go for it, right? Like, I'm at the point now, I think where the first 20 years of my life, I was like a half in, half out kind of guy.
Yeah.
Now I'm just all in, man. So
I think that aligns perfectly with what we believe too. And, you know, keeping yourself open-minded to different possibilities. And we never say like, hey, basketball is end all be all. That's what it has to be. You know, sometimes your life pivots and you move into different things that you're curious about or you enjoy. But I think what you said about being an open, you know, having an open mind and letting yourself, you know, be open to different avenues of life. And then once you know, or once you decide to go with it, just go all in. And I think that's an important message.
Yep.
In talking about your motivation, this is kind of a two-sided question, but motivation for your athletes, one, how do you motivate? And two, how do you motivate in the context of workload management? So how do you know when to motivate, knowing, and how do you know what response you're going to get out of that motivation, while also keeping in the back of your mind workload management, because that's a very important topic right now.
Sure, it absolutely is. Rightfully so too. In terms of motivation, you know, like, if I really need to get someone to get out of their comfort zone and maybe just try to, you know, excel a little more and push themselves a little bit, I mean, I don't think, for me, I'm just a nice guy. Like, you know, I feel like in sports, we've all had those like militant coaches, and, you know, and that might be someone's character, but it's not mine. You know what I mean? Like, and I, even in my earlier years, was a little more of a militant coach, maybe. But you know what, man? Like, people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I just spread some love, you know what I mean? Like, love will come back, and then they're gonna do what it is we're trying to get after to do, right? Yeah. So I've always believed that. And to touch on, Mike, your question about workload management, the reality is as sport coaches, skill coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, we're all just guessing, right? Like, let's throw some stress, because that's really all training is, right? Let's throw some stress to this particular athlete, whether that be skill acquisition training, whether, again, that be strength and conditioning, and see how they adapt, right? So, and unless, you know, you're continuing to ask questions, because I think that's the easiest thing to do, right? Is to just communicate, not have an ego, one, so the lines of communication are just that much more open. And certainly, again, just ask questions. Like, I can't say, like, I've really been able to just open up and ask more questions and just see what their interpretation is. Because what you might perceive it is that they're feeling or doing might be two entirely different things, right? So I think the simplest thing, any coach like myself, we've even done this at Canada Basketball. So some of the therapists and coaches like myself, not so much the sport coaches, but Canada Basketball calls it their integrated support team. And that's, again, their therapist, their strength coach, all those staff. They would go and then ask the players at the end of every drill or every segment of practice, or, of course, at the end of practice, hey, buddy, what is your rate of perceived exertion here? If we were to rank this whole practice on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being it's the hardest, what would you give it, right? And, of course, I think it's better to ask them. I've made the mistake of having iPads and just getting my teams to submit them. Yeah. And then I'm not even looking at those responses until after the workout. So what does it even matter now, right? Mm-hmm. But to go and ask them to actually have that face-to-face interaction. And you know what? If they tell me that they don't feel great that day, then I'm not going to push on them. I'm just going to have them go through the bare minimum and just see. Maybe they get warmed up. Maybe they can get after it. But again, short question, long answer. To just, again, touch on to help answer the workload management. Unless you're asking questions, you're just guessing. Yeah. Now, if you wanted to take it another level, which, again, what I've been fortunate to do with Canada Basketball is we actually use objective measurements to see where they're at, whether that be the use of Omega Wave was a device that we used at Canada Basketball. I'm sure they still do. I don't work formally with the national team anymore, but Omega Wave is just like, it's a simple pre and post measurement reading that you would lay there for 4 minutes with a heart rate strap on, an electrode on your forehead, and it'll tell you where you're at, again, pre-workout or practice, and then post. And then we would measure these guys on a daily basis when they're in training camps. Just to give you some context, what was pretty cool is working with, when Jay Triano was the head coach of the senior national team, you know, Charlie and Sam that run the integrated support team were able to go and show this data to Coach Triano. And when we had those 2-a-day practices, as we all do in these training camps usually, right? Okay, a lot of the guys were stressed now. So now let's pull back. Coach Triano's like, all right, let's not even do our second practice. They got the whole team and went to the Blue Jays game that afternoon instead. So this whole load management conversation has been in the works now, probably just the last couple years in the NBA, right? With Kawhi last year with the Raptors, it's kind of really a new thing, but it's something Canada basketball has been doing now for the last number of years. Now, I haven't been with them for 2 years, but I was with them for 4 summers, and all of those 4 summers, these were our methods as to actually measuring the way these guys were adapting to the stress of playing and practicing their sport. So it's been interesting to see. I personally use a Whoop device now, because I've used Omega Wave with my athletes too, but you can get just wearable pieces of technology now that just kind of tell you where you're at. And a really, really simple one to do too, guys, is just like a heart rate monitor. If you're able to track your resting heart rate at the start of every day, that'll give you context, right? Like if you can obviously accumulate some data over a number of days and kind of see where your average is, well, there's a strong correlation between your resting heart rate's going to be higher one morning if you're under a great deal of stress. And then that could give you some context as to whether you want to push that day or get the bare minimum or maybe just back off. So,
It's crazy. It's crazy where technology has kind of come and what it can kind of do for athletes that back in the olden days, they were just going out there and playing and not really worrying about any of that stuff. It's crazy where
definitely in the olden days here, but like Omega Wave was used with the Soviets in this, like, I think the 70s. And this is what they were using to measure their astronauts in space and seeing how they were stressed. So the Eastern Bloc societies have really been a little bit more responsible with their data collection, and now on the Western side, we're just really eating this stuff up now. It's a little more modern to us, right?
Yeah. All right, so moving gears here a little bit. I mean, it touches on the same kind of stuff, but in season versus off season training, how does it differ and how should it differ in your opinion?
Sure. In the in season of anyone's sport, basketball, what I do is just a supplement now. It's not like, I'm not like, there's no ego here. I'm not telling anyone that they need to do more strength and conditioning. Obviously, that's going to conflict with them in their in season. But it depends too, right? Like if you have athletes that are not getting much playing time, if you have any players that are injured and they're not playing, then certainly you can go and just dose more athletic development or more strength and conditioning than they're getting in basketball, right? So the question really depends. What's been really interesting though is this whole last few months we've been under quarantine and this social distancing, and that just to give you an example, Joe, last week one of my athletes said, Coach, like, because they're training 4 days a week, like most of my athletes are 3 to 4 times a week, because really they got nothing better to do right now, right? So for me, it's been a blessing in disguise for these guys to really truly get an off-season type of program going, where normally, where would they be at this time of the year? From high school right to rep, from rep right to AAU. Like, I don't think I've ever been able to really give someone a standard traditional off-season program with a basketball player, and I don't know how long. Again, unless they're those ones that are injured and they're not able to play. But so it really depends where they're at within their in-season or off-season. But again, going back to my athletes, he asked, Coach, do you think we'd be able to get this amount of training in, or would we be doing this training this way if it wasn't for the social distancing? And I'm like, probably not. Like, right? We're actually able to get something a little bit more here, that it's a little bit more, I think it's like you could have the best program guys in the world. You could want to say, okay, I want to execute A, B, C, and X, Y, and Z, but plans are always subjective to change, right? Like there's never a perfect program that you're going to run someone perfectly through it without any interruptions. Yeah. Right. But yeah, it's been a challenge over the years working with a lot of these athletes, knowing that they're probably accumulating way more basketball, or guys, I have other sports of other athletes too. And it's pretty wild to see like just some of them redundant training that they're doing. And, you got to balance out here what's productive versus what's just making you tired,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it really depends on what you're doing, whether it's in season, off season, if they even have one, and what the sport is. But it's kind of been a lost thing in basketball over the years. So just for the message out there for people today, like if obviously you're out, maybe you're fortunate to have a driveway net, or maybe some people do have access to get into gyms secretly. But I think that there should be no excuse for people that every basketball player should be coming out of these times being pretty fit and being able to develop some athletic qualities, I would think. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. So then how much do you watch a player's, I mean, let's use basketball because we're basketball guys, but how much do you watch one of your athletes' basketball film to design your workout mix? So from mobility, speed, power, conditioning, how does that mix come together in your workout program? And how much do you watch their film to decide those things?
Good question. It's probably not as much film on my end as it might be more the sport coaches watching film, so to speak. That being said, I all the time will record my athletes, because sometimes the words I'm giving them, I think they might interpret those words like I'm delivering them, but they might not. So if I just show them the video of them doing a particular exercise after, we can break it down. I do that all the time. And I just organically do that at the same time as I'm filming them, usually on my story, uploading them on my story, tagging their name. Like they love that stuff, right? So I certainly think that over a lot of coaches, strength conditioning coaches, I certainly give love to, getting them on my social media and having them be a part of that. But to continue your question, Mike, when I have the time, I absolutely love going and watching my athletes play live. Now, I've been fortunate to work with many different levels, from younger to older, our national team, with the professional team, and the Niagara River Lions. And when I am able to be there a little more and see them play, then absolutely I get better context as to how I might want to go our training plan. But to actually watch film on them from previous games, I'd say that I don't do that maybe as much as I maybe should if I had more time to do it. But please understand that when an athlete comes to work with me, there's a very thorough investigation of screening going on before I just start throwing exercises at them, right? So I've even done, I'll even film those movement screens, right? So if there's anything that I missed, I can go back and look at them. But it's more about me filming and using that as a tool when I'm with them, more so than looking at the way their games are. And again, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of athletes at a lot of levels. So I don't even watch the NBA anymore, or other teams of other players. I don't even know. I'm actually trying to get out. And if teams and players are playing in my area of where my gym is or where I'm living, and I got time to get out there and watch them, I'm out there. And I certainly was fortunate to catch a lot of good high school games this past season.
And you've done a good job of kind of being present. I mean, I know there's a difference between sometimes strength trainers at the gym, and then they're not present kind of at the actual athletic event. So you've done, over time, and since I've known you, you've done a great job of showing up and being present at these events and showing your athletes that like you're more than just a strength trainer. You're going to be there to support them. You're going to be kind of supporting them through whatever sport they're playing, right? And that's important
100%.
for an athlete to see. So
Again, I think it goes back to my foundation of being an only child. I never had any siblings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really do love all my people, and I look at them like they're my brothers and sisters, and they come to my gym and work out with me and invest their time and money to be with me.
Yeah.
So I try to get out there and do the same for them. Absolutely.
Definitely. So changing gears a little bit, how you're looking at an athlete, how are you measuring their success? So I'm working out with you, and then I'm playing in a game. How are you going to measure kind of the success that you've had on that specific athlete?
Yep. So again, when you come in and you're working with me, we're going to go through some movement screening, and there's I have a combination. I use the functional movement screen, which is again what we used with Canada basketball. And then another tier to it would be, or another methodology I follow is functional range conditioning. And so I kind of mold and blend these two screens, and this gives me, for the most part, as much context as I need going into what I know I'm going to be prescribing them for the most part in training.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I almost feel
great.
like I forget
no,
what.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, guys, like every time we're training, I'm always observing and always watching. Again, I'm going to go back to that perfect world program, right? Like, okay, well, if I see you're moving a little differently to the way I wanted to expect it on paper, if I need to make a change or a modification, then so be it. I don't have a problem with doing that, right? And because again, there is no perfect world, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Jeff, I mean, with your business, and we've seen it over the last, 10 years, but really over the last 5 years, the rise in like dedication to a sport at such a young age. Kids are training now. Like, you have kids that are 8 years old that are playing 3 different sports, moving from one, traveling for it too, and going the distance. What age should kids start strength training? Number one, and number two, where do you see youth sports and this obsessiveness with trying to improve go?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, most kids that I'm seeing come in and work with me, and even working with some of these older guys that are now maybe playing at a higher level in the pros and so forth, you can start to see some of their breakdown and just the way their body is and whatnot. And it's kind of like a saying that's going around is players today may be overtrained and underdeveloped, right? So it kind of is like, again, going back to, are we doing productive work, or are we just doing more work?
Yeah.
Right, to make them tired, essentially. So I think when you look at it from that lens, it gives you a little bit more, again, better context as to what we're doing. What are the big rocks, if you will? So to answer your second part of your question, Mike, where I would hope it's going, because I can't predict the future, but where I would hope youth sports is going, and I know I'm biased because I'm the development coach, but I'd like to see more skills and youth sport coaches, if they're going to dabble with athletic development, and ironically they are already, like they're giving you in your sport levels of fitness that you would get if you just did fitness, right? Like obviously your heart rates are getting elevated, your nervous system has to work, your physiological, you're going to make change over time playing your sport. But then it gets to a certain point where if all you did was play sport, your tissues are now going to just plateau, right? And then now what happens over time, and this is what the literature says about the way our cells and our tissues and our body works, if you keep rehearsing these same redundant patterns and you do plateau, the next step after plateau is breakdown, injury. The tissue yields, okay? So that being said, now that we know that that's kind of how it works, and when we're looking at a younger athlete, we need to respect that and understand that this athlete then, this young human organism does not need repetitive patterning. What they need is variability, right? They need to be able to move in many ways, shapes, and forms. Now, that's kind of where there was some buzz in the in the sports world that maybe the multi-sport athlete comes out on top, but not always, right? And what I mean by that is, like, we normally see these higher level players make it, whatever those players are, the NBA, let's call it what it is, right? And really, how much of those guys were investing into, like, strength and conditioning? How much of those guys were really working on athletic development in comparison to they just got really athletic and really good playing their sport, right? So my point is it depends on the person. Obviously, genetics is the major thing here we need to discuss, right? And there are players that can just, again, develop athletic qualities by playing their sport alone and then make it to that level. There are players that, all right, if you want a square peg and just make them all do the same thing, well, you can't expect to have the same objective or the same return on your investment on all these players, right? You're going to get different things happen.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time. So it's like, now that we know that, why are we treating everybody like it's a cookie cutter program? Why are we treating everybody the same, right? Again, you can't discredit genetics. Certainly your environment of everything you've done leading up to this point of where you're living today on this day of your life matters. And I mean, like, injury history, like if you had accumulated any injuries, like that's going to play a role in the decision-making we're going to make moving forward as to how we develop you. We certainly do not want to put you at risk, right? Like, do no harm is number one. So guys, I know this is pretty, like, bold for me to say this, but I think a lot of youth sports today is pretty criminal in the way that we're just crushing kids. And it's like kind of like child abuse to me in certain situations. And I'm not saying all of it, but some stuff I see is just, like, pretty scary, man.
I think that's where people like you come in. It's like when me and Mike have a skill and we can teach basketball. I mean, you have a skill. You're a player development coach. It's important to kind of stay in your lane. We talk about this all the time. It's important to stay in your lane. If we're not knowledgeable about something, let's go to the people who are knowledgeable. So for you, for example, if we're not knowledgeable about player development, then we're not going to do it. If we're not knowledgeable about strength development, we're going to go to someone who does, right? So it's important to have people around you that can kind of help you in certain situations in what you're knowledgeable in, right?
Sure. Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, though? Why do you think that there are certain coaches in the industry that don't want to stay?
Because in the business world, there's opportunity to cross sell.
Yeah. So
But you're not doing anybody any service because there's so many good coaches out there nowadays that coaches are realizing, hey, I better find something I'm really good at and be specialize in that skill.
Be a wizard at it.
Yeah, and you have to, and you have to do that to be competitive. And now all of the customers need to realize, hey, there's a lot of coaches out there that are focusing on this and specializing that. So why would you go to a coach that I have my personal training? I got my personal training, designation when I was in university, and I was training. I was doing strength training for people, but by no means was I good enough or competitive enough with some of the strength trainers that I surrounded myself by. So I said, hey, I got to focus on something that, we can be really good
Mike,
at.
can I ask you something to piggyback on that?
Sure.
Do you, though, think that you having that sort of credential as a strength and conditioning coach or like a trainer, do you think that would help better your craft, though, as a better basketball coach?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's definitely there's value to understanding a piece of the puzzle. Like, you need to understand, like I need to know a piece of your world and you need to know a piece of our world so that
we can talk the same language.
Yeah.
You see it from that lens now.
Yeah.
Right? I believe, I think so too. And so I like that you mentioned that, because I wanted to mention that today, and I was like, man, I don't want coaches are going to hate me for saying this, but like, I almost feel like there should be some sort of baseline of knowledge or education that some sport coaches should have. And I'm not saying it be a personal training certification or that they need to go get a kin degree. I don't know what that is. But I think especially in youth sports, because you're setting up the foundation here now, right? So you should have some sort, if you're going to then go and I'm sorry, but you're a sellout I think you're a sellout if you're trying to incorporate some sort of strength and conditioning in your basketball program if you have no knowledge of strength and conditioning, right?
Yeah.
You're just trying to, you want them to be in your program and your program to have to offer it all when it doesn't, right? Yeah. So I think you're a sellout. So then, and I'm being bold when I say that because like, I know basketball too, a little bit, and I know I could coach basketball, but I don't want to, right? I want to just continue to, I'm a late learner again, remember? So I want to continue to get better at what I do. But what's interesting is you're starting to see more hybrids, and I'm saying professional ones now, not just ones that are trying to be wannabes, right? Like in the NBA now, there's no strength coaches anymore unless they have some sort of physiotherapy, chiropractic, or massage therapy like license. Like they're hybrids.
Yeah.
And I won't name names, but a colleague of mine that's a skills coach, a friend of mine, former colleague, he came to me about a year or so ago and said, Jeff, because he does do a little bit of both. He dabbles with both skills development and he has a diploma in fitness and health and his little personal training certification that he does do a little bit of both. And his question to me is like, which one do you think I should gravitate towards more of? And I said, honestly, both. Like the world needs more of those hybrids, I think.
Yeah,
because then again, you just see it from a better lens and you can make better connections.
For sure. If you're knowledgeable about something, go for it. Like if
you win.
If you're knowledgeable about player development, you're knowledgeable about athlete development in terms physically, then go for it for sure. And I agree with what you're saying about the hybrid. We could use more hybrid people. But if you don't want to do something, go for something that go do the thing that you're knowledgeable and do it to the best of your ability. Like you've done, and that's what we're trying to do, right? So I think that's important to be said for sure.
Cool.
I guess circuit training versus traditional strength training. I mean, the gimmicky stuff. I know you don't like a lot of it. I respect you as a trainer because you're getting right to the point. You're focusing on the real stuff and you're about getting it done. Does that depend on the athlete's body, position, time of the year? Like, speak to that a little bit.
I want to just say, like, anything works as long as you get the desired outcome you were looking to get after, right?
Yeah.
Like, the reality is our nervous system does not know the difference between playing the sport of basketball and wrestling a bear. And what I mean by that is it's all the same stuff. It's stress, right? Now, obviously, you would rather play basketball than wrestle a bear, so there's that component to it. But it's shifting you into, if you're familiar with our autonomic nervous system, you're going into sympathetic states, which is more your fight or flight, stressed out like state, right? And then the counter would be your parasympathetic, your rest or digest. So now that we know that that's as simple as it is, that's how stress is. It's just this juggle and this balance of shifting from sympathetic to parasympathetic and really appreciating that all of it is the same stuff. It's stress. Well, now it gives you better context as to how you want to go about your planning of a training camp, of your whatever, right? Your week or your month or your season, and that like you cannot just keep wrestling the bear multiple days in a row without backing off and having some sort of recovery like modality or strategies, right?
Definitely.
So yeah, and then again, that kind of goes back to what I was explaining earlier about, all right, well, you're still just guessing if you're not using these subjective wellness questionnaires. They're still subjective, so you're still guessing. But if you're using these wearable technologies or you're able to measure this stuff, you still really are just guessing. But the old track coach, the former track coach, who's now passed away, but was Ben Johnson's track coach. A lot of development coaches and strength and conditioning coaches have followed and stolen really his methodology of how he was training the track athletes in this simple high-low method. I'm going to bring the heat on Monday, and we're going to go lighter and we're going to back off on Tuesday. Like most humans seem to fluctuate well with a 48-hour window. Most. Now that could be subjective to change too. And again, you're just guessing, but yeah, just to give you an idea of like how it works. But like, guys, again, going back to those other coaches that are just thrashing kids all the time, right? So now you can imagine how it would conflict. It's if now they're coming to train with me, say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then they're doing their basketball workouts, and then we'll call it basketball and then some. They're doing extra stuff, right? And it's like, okay, like, what do you do now? Like, I can't give them the hardest workout Monday, Wednesday, Friday when they're getting the hardest workouts Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Now it's just like, how do you go about it, right? And of course, hopefully that you have a good dialogue and you can communicate with that coach and say, hey, coach, I'm going to bring the gas on Monday. Can you just go a little lighter on Tuesday? And then I'll go lighter on Wednesday and I'll let you bring the heat on Thursday. Like, but who's doing that? You know what I mean? Now it's, again, it's a battle of egos and or lack of communication.
Yeah. That's great insight. That's great insight. Jeff, before we let you go, last question. We like to ask all of our guests this question. What is your greatest piece of advice for, a younger athlete?
Yeah, I think I already touched on it, guys. It's, again, just not making the mistake of doing more work and confusing that with productivity, right? So now I like to think that I do a really good job. I'm pretty confident in that this may be something I offer a little more than most coaches, is I educate them because I want them to eventually one day when they're tired of looking at my bald head and they don't want to see me anymore, or they move on, or even with my high school athletes, right? Like, it's like, I want to prepare them, at least in the weight room and in the strength and conditioning environment, which is my role. I want to prepare them if they are going to that school of theirs, that are going to their college or their university programs, that now they have the tools to better understand. I was just talking about that with one of my D1 guys who's going as a freshman this year to his school, and I was just like, man, could you imagine? Because he's a stud. He understands the training, and he's training with me 4 days a week. And anyway, I was just telling him, like, could you imagine like being a freshman going to one of these like Division I programs or these CIS programs and not having any experience in the weight room other than just going and doing some bench presses and bicep curls? Like, what a rude awakening it's going to be for them, right? And why would you want to bring on excess stress like that when you're going as a freshman already? It's a new school. You got, right? It's going to be a lot, right? So again, I'm just here trying to educate them and appreciate and understand that what it is we're doing is productive.
That's awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks for joining the show. We can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure, and I know it's a lot of good insight for a lot of our viewers. So
for sure,
guys, I appreciate you. I love what you're doing with your social media. Your Instagram page looks awesome. I like that. I'm looking forward to seeing your program, guys, because you're doing a great job of marketing it, and I know you guys are great coaches in the community.
Awesome. Thanks again, Jeff, for joining us. I know a lot of our members are going to see some value from this conversation. And, we appreciate you coming on, taking the time to share with us. And, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate just spending time with me and letting me just rant about what I like to do.
Yeah, Jeff, we appreciate you. Best in the business, in my opinion. I've been doing it for a long time now. You're constantly learning, and that's one of the great attributes about you. And you're always trying to get better, and it's what we try to do as basketball coaches. You try to do as an athletic development coach. We really appreciate you having you coming on the show.
Appreciate you guys, man. Thanks so much, guys. Keep doing good work.